Yeah, Michael, it seems like you just want to get a corporate sponsorship from Speedo. I feel like you haven't taken that Speedo off in the last week. I think the office would feel more comfortable if you would change back into normal clothing attire. Is that possible?
Oh, this is office casual. It's the new trend, Pam. You know, business on top, beach on the bottom.
Humor is a hard one. Like, people don't even get humor, let alone machines. It's kind of blowing my mind.
Some people think tech is ruining creativity. Others believe it's helping us find new ways to be creative. This show is about telling the stories to prove it can help us become our most creative selves. My friend Adam, for example, an aspiring screenwriter, felt creatively stuck. So together, we explored how his favorite AI tool could help him break through that barrier. We started with the core of any great script, character development. From building deep, round characters to actually having conversations with them, Adam discovered something unexpected. Enjoy this conversation and stick around if you want to see Adam's reaction a week after trying these tools. Adam Joseph is one of the most creative people I've ever met. You can judge his creativity by the dozens of companies he's helped while being a strategic or innovation consultant. You can learn more about that on his LinkedIn. But I personally judge his creativity by the thoughtful questions he asks, and I hope he asks them today, or the really creative way he made his girlfriend believe he was in London for his proposal, and now they're married. So happy story there. Not so happy story. Yeah, I love that. Not so happy story, Adam. That fact that I asked you, how creative are you on a scale from 1 to 10? 1 being like zero creative, and 10 being the most creative person on the planet. You told me you would get as far as being an 8 out of 10 at some point of your life, or that's your creative potential. But when I asked you, how have the past 30 days been, you said 1. But that's a tragic story for someone as creative as you are. It's awesome to have you here, Adam. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Like I said, people can search you online or look at your LinkedIn, but I want to ask you a more interesting question for learning more about you, which is, why do we have a Coke with us today? Why are we drinking a Coke today?
Well, for a couple of reasons. First, I used to collect glass Coke bottles specifically when I would travel as a kid to different states and different countries. And so I had this little collection of Coke bottles in foreign languages that I thought was really fun. So it's personally meaningful. Since then, I do not drink Coke as much since learning what's actually in it. But the one exception to that is when I go to the movies. I let myself drink a Coke whenever I'm in the movie theater. And because we'll be talking about movies and screenwriting today, I figured it would be a relevant drink.
Very relevant drink. But I'll say I haven't opened mine yet. I might do that right now.
Good.
And the reason why I haven't opened it is because, and before we actually say cheers, is because I haven't had a Coke in more than 10 years. So
Okay.
yeah, it's a big feat for me. It was about a decade ago that I had my last one. I used to drink it all the time, but 10 years ago, I was probably in one of my lowest points creatively. I was doing this case competition for Unilever, the consumer product good company, and I was
Mm.
in Colombia 2 weeks away from going to London for their headquarters for the final round. We were like the final 30 out of thousands of competitors. And I was with my two college friends, and we had just presented our idea to a bunch of leaders, and they basically demolished it. Like we were completely blank two
Mm.
weeks before. And it wasn't even busy. I was just so obsessed with figuring it out. And it ended up working sort of okay. But the thing is, I was so obsessed with it that I forgot about the addiction that I had. And then a week later, I was like, I haven't had a Coke in a week. Could I make it this year? And that ended up being 10 years. I'll do it for you and for this conversation.
I, I appreciate you breaking the seal after 10 years.
Cheers, Adam.
Cheers.
Yeah. Not as, yeah, that's
It's
okay.
a, it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of sugar. Well, let's dive deeper into that frustration that I bet you feel when you feel like you're very creative, 8 out of 10, but you're just a 1 in the past 30 days.
Yeah, to me, the core of that is just about time management and actually applying the creativity. Because to me, it's one thing to think creative, right, and to feel creative, but unless you're finding an outlet for that, it stays bottled up and can turn into resentment or frustration or disappointment, like a lot of negative emotions. So I've been healthily distracted doing things like planning a wedding and managing everything around that. But even outside of that, I've really struggled to find the right outlet for my creativity in this case and finding protecting time to do things like screenwrite. So I'm really looking for ways to both manage the creative process on my own, but also to improve that process and the outcomes with it. And I just haven't had the structure or the willpower, the discipline to make that happen yet.
Well, you have the potential for sure. And more importantly, you know you have the potential. And there's all sorts of combinations of that. People that don't think they have it, they do, in my opinion, but they just haven't explored it yet. In your case, you're kind of like Luke Skywalker who hasn't used the Force in years, and you just got to bring it back and make some time, make it worth it. I would say I see your creativity in every sentence, and we've already seen it today. But in reality, it maybe it's not up to the standard that you believe you can get to, right? And that's one thing that I want to help with this show, right? And it's also something that I truly and wholeheartedly believe that technology can help. However, some people might not feel that way. Some people might say that automating things with AI, for example, is quite the opposite, and we're just losing all the creativity in humanity. So, before we dive deep into our experiment today and the things that I want to try, I saw that you also use index cards, kind of like for brainstorming and creativity, which is a great tool that a lot of people use. Well, there's this study that I found very interesting that wanted to evaluate whether AI specifically helps with creativity. It's from March 22 of 2024, so fairly recent from the
Mm.
moment we're recording this. And what they did is they gave people, half of the people, they gave some prompt cards created by, I think it was Chat GPT and GPT-3 at the time. And then the other
Mm.
half, they didn't give them anything. And then they evaluated their creative output. And they did prove that the ones that started with that prompt, they were a little more individually creative, and at the same time they didn't have the same level of diversity across them. Maybe because they were just beginning in the same path, but to me that's the orthodoxy that I want to challenge, which is seeing a lot of the studies out there in AI. Most of them aimed at businesses try to prove that you can do what you did in 3 hours in 30 minutes or in even less, 5 minutes or whatever it is. And it's all about how can I get 80% there with AI, and then how do I get that last mile within me, which is kind of like what happened in I observed in this experiment. Obviously, I was not involved with it. My belief is that you can do quite the opposite, which is if you get something up to 80%, how can you polish it or get that last mile and really get some sort of feedback? So if you agree with me, that's exactly what I want us to challenge and see how it works for you today.
Yeah, let's do it. I think there's a role for both at the end of the day, and depending on the medium or the form. I'm curious to see how it applies to screenwriting, which is a technical tool by default and hyper structured, both in the planning process, but then also actually, typing into the computer itself. And so any tool that can facilitate or accelerate that process and let me focus more on the human powered creativity, like I'm all game for.
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely not a screenwriting expert, but I think
Mm.
these are what we used to call transferable skills, right? That might apply to any type of writing or any type of creativity. So the way I want to start is kind of like building on that idea of the 80% you build and 20% like you get an analysis that takes you to the 100%, and you get
Mm.
analysis of taking you to the 100%. Is we will upload a script into ChatGPT, which you told me is one of the tools that you use, and then we'll kind of like see what kind of analysis we get on what exists. But to make it a little more relevant for those watching, is we're going to use the pilot episode of The Office because that's a show that people recognize. And just to be clear, we're not going to use the whole season one. We're not going to use the full seasons. We're just going to focus on if Adam were the screenwriter of that pilot episode and needed, NBC or whoever to, invest in your project, like how do you get that feedback to make that happen? How does that sound?
That sounds great. I think The Office is a perfect example because it's a show about nothing but people. You don't really know much about the business. The world isn't blowing up. There are no external stakes that drive these characters. It's purely character development and interaction, which is often the hardest part of writing a screenplay. So I think it's a perfect place to start.
And that actually leads me to the first thing we want to do today, which is building a framework for evaluating a character. The most generic or general way people see this is flat character or round character or like deep character, right? That's one way. But if we were to evaluate The Office's script and say, hey, pick Michael Scott for example, how do you evaluate Michael Scott? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we're going to brainstorm together if we were to evaluate any character on a few dimensions, which ones would those be? So that when we get to that, it's something that you specifically, Adam Joseph as the screenwriter here, feels like that's how he wants to evaluate his script.
Sounds great.
The other thing that I want to do, because it's very annoying that you see me typing or I see you typing, is I'm just going to use one of these tools that I really enjoy. So right here is the dictation mode. So I can just talk to it. And that's much, much more entertaining than seeing us type, right?
Cool.
So the question that I want to ask is, if I want to evaluate a character of a script, which are the dimensions that I want to consider? They give me a list of 5 maybe, and you can tell me if you think those are appropriate, whether you would choose all 5 or which ones would you change and why. Okay, so not a very elaborate prompt. We just want to start from scratch.
Cool.
If I'm writing a script and I want to evaluate whether my characters are flat or round and what dimensions they have that determine whether they're flat or round, which variables should I consider? Give me a list of 5 along with a short sentence that explains why that is important to evaluate. You'll see it's even better than me typing. It gets at least most of it, even with my accent. Are you good with this? Anything you would change before I hit send?
No, let's see what happens.
Cool. So it gives us internal conflict, character evolution. The arc, in this case, it'll be on a pilot if we evaluate only the pilot, which is not the full story, but it kind of, that's what happens when you're writing a show, right? You got to tell as much to sell the idea. There's also contradictory traits, motivations and desires, and then there is unique voice and perspective. Do you want to change anything, whether it's replacing or tweaking any of these?
Yeah. Just taking a moment to actually read them. The only thing I would add would be maybe in motivations and desires, I would also add some kind of barrier or roadblock, which could be either internal or external. So there's something they want, but there's something preventing them from getting it.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think it's a great list.
Let me see if I can represent that appropriately.
Sure.
Add for number 4, what are the barriers for the character? I don't know if I exactly represent what you said. Motivation and desires, barriers between. Is that what you wanted to add?
That's perfect. This is already kind of freaking me out how powerful this is.
Awesome. So when this finishes its dwelling, right, we will tell it to upload the episode of The Office. In this case, since it's something that it's known in its database, I got to be very explicit at saying, like, don't look at season 5, episode 13 or whatever. Like, only focus on the input that I'm giving you, but evaluate it under the adjusted 5 things, right?
Yeah.
Here am I uploading the episode 1 pilot of The Office from 2005. And then I'm going to tell that prompt. With the adjusted 5 variables or dimensions, Evaluate the character of Michael Scott in the uploaded Office pilot. Please do not consider anything else that you might have in your database knowledge other than the PDF that I'm providing you. So that first thing saying based solely on the pilot script, we see that. And,
Mhm.
and it gets incredibly interesting to me, and I'm curious to see what you think. Michael's not doing so well in internal conflict and character evolution. Obviously, it's just a pilot. Then it's got a green and contradictory traits, including the barriers that you were wanting to see. Those are in yellow. And then number 5, the unique voice and perspective. He's definitely unique. So what are your thoughts there?
Man, I love it. So I know The Office well, and so I also have to sort of block out my understanding of like all the other episodes and focus just on this specific script. Um, I think that it's a fantastic framework on its own. So you have to give it credit for the structure within which it fills. Um, I think I really agree with the list, and it's helpful to get language around, in this specific instance, how this character expresses or fails to express these key traits we'd like to see. I don't know if I agree with all of them at the same time. And I think I know why. So for number 4, motivations and barriers, right? ChatGPT says shallow motivation with some implied barriers. Um, Michael is motivated by a desire to be liked and admired. I don't know if I would call that a shallow motivation. Like, I think, again, it's unfair because I know the character deeply, but this is a person who's lonely, right? Who's seeking the deepest emotional validation that people can tend to seek, which is respect and acknowledgement and inclusion from their peers and from their partners and their colleagues, and that's a very, very powerful and deep-seated motivation. So I agree with the conclusion, but I don't agree with the framing of it in that instance. Um, the internal conflict, I also think in the episode, uh, it's not shown on screen, so I don't blame ChatGPT for not picking up on it. But there's clearly multiple moments where Michael Scott is deciding on a big decision for people, right? In this case, in the context of the episode, this one is about, well, is he going to swallow his pride and go to this party that he knows he's not invited to, but show up anyways? That's a huge conflict and that's at the core of his motivation of being liked and people knowing that he's showing up even if he's not invited. It's like, again, I don't blame ChatGPT for not seeing that, but as an audience member, we recognize that off screen this decision has been made, and that is a reflection of this character and what they would like. So it's a super helpful conversation stimulant to understand the character, and for me then as a screenwriter to think about, well, what are the choices that I want to show on screen versus off screen? That's definitely a powerful lesson from this is can you get the audience to an emotional conclusion or heighten that conclusion by subtracting what you see on the page and therefore see on the screen. And that's a human level of induction, right? That I'm not sure ChatGPT would pick up. Maybe if we had prompted it specifically, it would, but in the sort of generic reading, I don't think it would.
Yeah, and if you wanted to go deeper, you could have asked only for the dimension you were most interested in. And in the interest of time, we won't do that.
Exactly. This is also an interesting exercise as a writer to reverse engineer it. Because if I'm thinking about, say, I have a character and I know that they're flat right now. I want to find ways to make them more interesting or engaging. I might want some help, brainstorming. Well, what are ways to do that? Given the script that I have, right? Ask specifically in this scene, right? Or in a scene that's not here, like what could I add to spice up this character or to add a dimension that's missing? That kind of generative component, not just the analytical one, is what's probably most useful for someone like me, especially because in the context of screenwriting, it's really annoying because you have this product that's like 100 pages. For a movie, it's like 120 pages. You're like, oh, I have to go through and find every instance of where this person did or didn't do this thing. And I've got it's a very manually intensive process. So anything that can streamline or automate or just clarify and pinpoint, where those opportunities are to improve character development is super useful.
Absolutely. 'Cause you can say Michael has or doesn't have a conflict because of these reasons. And then somebody judging you, could be the person that decides whether you get the pilot produced or not, could say, look at these other 5 pieces of evidence that whether you didn't want them to be interpreted that way or they just came across in the acting that way. And then if you go back to the script, you can be extra careful into making sure the actor is executed right or any sort of tweaking at direction point. So the cool thing about this is that there'll never be a perfect answer, right? We probably ask ChatGPT again, it'll get a different answer. You also have a lot of people that you look up to or that you want to validate this with. So could you give me a name of a mentor that you would love to have? It could be a famous producer or director that if you were to hand them your script and ask them about any of these, who would that be? It could be literally anybody.
The first person that comes to mind is Aaron Sorkin, who's the legend in screenwriting. He did The Social Network and A Few Good Men, and like a whole bunch of classic movies. And he's known for character development and dialogue. That'd
Awesome.
be a great one.
Cool. So, for example, we can say, based on anything and everything there is known about this Aaron Sorkin persona, how would they analyze a specific variable here? And what would they tell me? Based solely, of course, on the PDF we're looking at. So let's try that and just see its power. It might obviously not be what he thinks, but we have a lot of records on what this person thinks. And it's free advice. It's probably harder, than to asking the actual guy.
Oh, absolutely.
So you want to go with character evolution, conflict, which variable do you want to go with?
Let's go with let's do contradictory traits. I think that's Michael is a brilliant character because he's full of contradictory traits. That's like his defining arc. So better material there.
If I am a screenwriter and I want to get feedback from Aaron Sorkin and he is open to reading this PDF that I uploaded and only that PDF that I uploaded, none other references to The Office, and I were to ask him, hey, give me a short paragraph analyzing Michael Scott's contradictory traits based on the PDF, tell me what you would think Aaron Sorkin would say. That's correctly spelled, by the way, right?
Yeah, that's him. I'm excited. Yeah, Aaron Sorkin is my own personal writing coach.
Michael Scott is a contradiction in motion, a man desperate to be admired but armed solely with the tools of a clown. Would you agree with what it says here? Or do you think this is useful feedback?
100%. And I'm just taking a moment to read it. Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I think that's not only very articulate and in a slightly dramatic Aaron Sorkin style, which is what he's known for, but really cuts to the core of the character and the motivations that drive him and the contradictions that define him on the way. I'm curious if we could make it more productive. Because I would say this description is very descriptive in what it's saying, but I'm curious, like if we asked Aaron, how would he improve it?
Okay.
Or what ideas would he have to make Michael a more compelling or more sympathetic character, right? What would he suggest?
Okay, that's perfect. But I want to try this in the next tip that I want to give you, which is you also already told us that you struggle with, the productivity part, the making time and blocking time for that. So many people have the ChatGPT app on their phone. And one cool thing that you can do is schedule tasks. So people use it for all sorts of things like checking inventory on a product they want to shop or getting a workout routine. I know a friend that would do that. But here, you could actually say, hey, for the next week, I want Aaron Sorkin to tear apart my character and every day give me a analysis of one of these 5 variables for this particular character, along with his recommendations on how to improve it. And after a week, it's not, I dedicated 3 hours on Monday. It's, little chunks that I get a message from Aaron Sorkin saying, hey, I actually checked this Michael Scott guy, and here's how I would improve his internal conflict. Next day, the arc, etc. So do you want to try that? The tricky part about doing it right now is we got to start a whole new prompt. So what I would like to do, this is actually something that's useful when you want to start a whole new chat, is you can ask it to summarize what you want, right? So that you can just copy and paste that prompt when you're able to create the scheduled tasks. So let me try that real quick and you see if the output works. I want to take this conversation to a new prompt to schedule a repetitive task. Give me a prompt where I would get daily feedback for a week from Aaron Sorkin on one of the variables that we previously disclosed, analyzing the character of Michael Scott. And in addition to the sample that you gave me, it would give me specific advice on how to make an improvement on that variable. Many people would start from scratch. So I love this because,
Yeah.
I'm not the best writer and I might probably even forget what I want to do. And as of right now, we found out also that it doesn't have access to uploading PDF scripts for scheduled tasks just yet. So what we can do is tell it to find it in its database, which it probably has. So this happens all the time. You got to tweak a prompt for whatever reason. So I can just tell it, since I cannot upload files for scheduled tasks right now, ask it to search for the plot episode of The Office in the US and only use that as a source, not any other episode. In your case, if you're working on your own character, that of course it won't have in its database, you can ask it to read the script and summarize an analysis of that character, even include some key scenes, and you can copy and paste that into the chat, right? So here's the updated prompt. So we go around the limitation. Hopefully by the time many people are watching this, this is no longer a limitation, but we can work around them. You'll see other ways we do that. So again, we go to schedule tasks now under GPT-4o, and we paste the prompt. I want to stress that let's schedule the daily prompt for the next 7 days, starting right now. That just happens because it sometimes doesn't understand it's got to schedule the prompt. So you see it's now creating the task, and it'll give you the first one tomorrow. But just for the sake of this exercise, show me day 1 now. And you get the feedback from him. Hopefully you set that on your phone so you get the notifications every day, and you can have a little conversation with him after that.
That's so cool. I find it creativity in writing is easier to do and better when you can gamify it, which this helps with. Obviously, as a tool, it's super powerful. But also generally when I'm reacting to a prompt, it's much harder to both create a structure or an urgency or a need on your own and then fulfill or meet that, rather than receiving it from external source, like either a mentor or a colleague, or in this case, ChatGPT. So I'm super excited to bake this into the core of my routine in a way that takes the pressure of having to design my own writing session out, similar to going to a workout class where you put on gym clothes and you show up, and that's kind of all you have to do. I would love to be able to do that with writing, and this is a tool that's going to help me do that rather than having to design my own workouts every single day of the week.
Yeah, I figured this would be good. And I love the Michael Scott reference because, the producers of The Office in the United States had to evolve this character to make him more likable so they could last almost, 10 seasons, 9 seasons, rather than the original idea, which was to get him fired in the end of season 1 and move on with another show. So they had to tweak him in a lot of ways. You can look that up, but they changed his dress code. They changed the way he his hairstyle. He becomes a better salesman, gets romantically involved with his manager. So it wasn't AI back then. I'm pretty sure it wasn't. And it doesn't mean you don't consult. If you're friends with Aaron Sorkin, I strongly recommend you do that. But here you can have, 10 prompts with 10 advisors or any combination of what we just tried.
Absolutely. Writing is an inherently dynamic process, both the character arc over the course of a show or a movie, but also as you get feedback on the script from people and you read it. And it's this very complicated web of content at the end of the day. And I think tools like ChatGPT will be super helpful for me when I pick back up my writing habit to manage that, both within the story, but then over time as I evolve the product. So I haven't really even thought about how to plug in tools like this to my writing practice yet, but after even just a few minutes, I'm like, yeah, this is going to make life a lot easier, a lot more fun right off the bat.
Another way to make it more productive is the voice mode, which is pretty cool right now because you can have human-like conversations. So the
Mm.
immediate thing that I thought of when I, saw this, we have this technology is you could talk to your character.
That would be so cool.
Do you want to try it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So there's again, kind of similar to tasks, there is a limitation,
Yeah.
which is you cannot upload a file. You got to start the conversation with your voice. You cannot like chat with it and say, "Hey, let's hop on a call, Michael Scott." You can't do that. But as you were mentioning tools, there's a lot of tools out there for screenwriting already. And there's a lot of GPTs which are like little agents within the Chat GPT realm that you can use. I will list some of them in the notes for this show. However, I also built one for you, Adam. How does that sound?
I'm super excited. Let's do it.
Okay, cool. So I built one, which is called AH. AH stands for Actor Hiring Agency. And the reason why I built it is because you can add all the input that you want out of the character, and then you can just read that out loud and set the stage for the scene you want to run with your character. So again, this could be a character you create, or it could be an existing character and just letting it happen with the knowledge that it already has. You'll see it has some interesting personality here. So do you want to still do Michael Scott, or do you want to do something else?
Let's try with Michael Scott and then maybe try another one after. I'm curious to see both.
Awesome. Okay. So you say I created some pre-written prompts here, but you can say, "Hey, I want to role play with the character of Michael Scott from the first episode, the pilot episode of The Office." And then here we can actually upload it. So I'll just upload it here. Now, this is a really fancy agency. They won't just take your prompt for it, right? Now, it's a little, has a personality, but you can answer all these questions. So you can say, "I want to be Jim. I want to be a new employee. I want to be close to canon. I want to have the accent that Steve Carell would have." All those things we can do. So I'll let you read them and tell me the rundown, and I'll say it back to it.
Sure. Let's say close to canon, not Steve Carell style voice. They are in a meeting. My role is Pam. Scene purpose is going for laughs. And I would like to emphasize the phrase, "We'll burn that bridge when we get there."
I've heard that phrase before.
One of my favorites.
So again, this is not where we're going to talk to it. We're just building the prompt. So, AHA likes it. It says, "A vision, a masterpiece in the making." And then it'll give you, after, talking quite a lot, it usually apologizes for talking all that much, the prompt that I'll have you read, because you're Pam. I'm not Pam, Adam. You are, right? And then you just got to review this to make sure you're okay with what it wrote. Obviously, this saved you a lot of time versus starting from scratch. Read it for a second and let me know if this is what you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Looks great.
Okay, so we just got to have you read this out loud, right? Actually, I'm going to text you this so you can read it on your phone if you have it nearby.
Yeah.
Cool. And then the other thing, it can also give you some tips. So I wrote this because there are a couple of things that you might want to consider. For example, I have my GPT talk on a female voice. So it can adjust the accent, but it'll still be female. So you can just go to settings first, change that. It'll give you some tips. So if we ever publish this agency, you might want to ask it those things. So here you see, well, hopefully you're rated between 60 and 90 seconds. You can add your own things, but if you read it, it'll be within that interval. It's recommending, kind of the voices there that we can choose across the ones that GPT offers. You got to start a new voice chat because some people might not know that. If you feel like it went off, just say end scene or out of character, and then you can always reset.
Cool. Sounds great.
Okay, Adam, this is the final activity we have for the day. When I give you a thumbs up, you can give your prompt.
Hi, ChatGPT. For this session, please play Michael Scott from The Office, the US version pilot episode. Keep your personality faithful to the original pilot. Awkward, overly confident, inappropriate, desperate to be liked, and totally unaware of how he comes across. You speak in a non-Steve Carell voice, but still carry that clumsy boss energy. Feel free to improvise and go on bizarre tangents. You love to talk, and you think you're hilarious. The setting is a meeting at Dunder Mifflin, Scranton, where I, Pam, am attending one of your classic motivational or team building meetings. The goal is a lighthearted chaos and laughs. Make jokes, do bad impressions, quote song lyrics, and most importantly, drop your favorite line. Quote, "We'll burn that bridge when we get there." Make it your mantra. Feel free to stay in character, react naturally, and surprise me. If I say end scene or out of character, please pause or shift the scene. Let's begin.
Oh, hey, Pam. So, I have this amazing idea for a team building exercise. It's gonna be like the best one ever. Picture this. We all get in a circle, right? And we just stare at each other. Yeah, it's like a staring contest, but for team building. We'll burn that bridge when we get there. No,
Michael,
wait, wrong phrase.
Michael, is this just because you bought everybody swimsuits at the office yesterday and you want everybody to wear them to work tomorrow?
Oh, no, Pam, not at all. The swimsuits were for a different team building exercise, like a beach day, but in the office, because who doesn't love the beach, right? It's all about bringing the summer vibes to Scranton. And plus, we can always burn that bridge when we get there,
Yeah, Michael, it seems like you just want to get a corporate sponsorship from Speedo. I feel like you haven't taken that Speedo off in the last week. I think the office would feel more comfortable if you would change back into normal clothing attire. Is that possible?
Oh, this is office casual. It's the new trend, Pam, business on top, beach on the bottom. It's all about confidence, which I have in spades. But if it makes everyone uncomfortable, maybe I'll accessorize with a tie or something. How about that?
That sounds great, Michael. Can you just change it from hot pink? I don't think it's the best color for your eyes, and it actually is triggering for Phyllis from an incident she had in high school with a swim team.
Hot pink, not working? Noted. I'll switch to a more calming color. Maybe neon green? It's all about making sure everyone's comfortable. So, Phyllis, if you're listening, I got your back. We're in this together. And hey, if we run into any more swimsuit issues, we'll burn that bridge when we get there. Perfect.
End scene. That is... Humor is a hard one. Like, people don't even get humor, let alone machines. It's kind of blowing my mind.
Yeah, and I hope it blows your mind even more when it's something you create, because I hope you can get to create even things cooler than Michael Scott, although that's hard.
That is hard. It's just a great character, and just a lot of great material to pull from. So, yeah, wow, I'm super impressed.
Well, Adam, that's everything we prepared for you today. My challenge for you is try it as much as you can for the next 7 days, whether it's scheduled prompts, conversations with your characters or any character, and then you record a short video in your phone and let us know how it feels. Maybe you're not back in 8, but hopefully you're not still in 1.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been so helpful and so fun, and I'm so excited to give this a shot for the next week.
Any parting thoughts?
Take it easy on the Coke.
And there you have it. That's Adam's story. I was thrilled to have that conversation and even more excited to see what he thought a week later. I'll show you that in just a second, but first, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe to stay tuned for more stories like this one, and drop a comment with your thoughts. I'm Fede. Thanks again for watching.
It's been 1 week since my creativity session with Fede, and I'm feeling organized and energized. Specifically, I've gotten a lot of help from ChatGPT, blending together different writing structures and making it into my own format, which we can see is starting to take shape on my writing board.